Louisville does only Louisville and is completely unapologetic about it. It has tenure, being the oldest city west of the Appalachian and the fulcrum that allowed the populace to tilt westward to fulfill manifest destiny. The old-fashioned and the hamburger were invented here. They have the world's largest baseball bat. And if you've ever suffered through being sung happy birthday, you got Louisville to thank. Louisville isn't clever. Its nickname is the River City. It is what it is, and it doesn't care what you think about it. Well, I think Louisville's pretty damn special and wonderfully overlooked, making it a primo destination for anyone thirsting for something real and weird, but not real weird. Let's get one thing out of the way. This town is built on booze, so 12-steppers step aside. I mean, you literally walk through a barrel birth canal to get to downtown. Perhaps its inebriated enlightenment is what gives the city its optimistic air. Of course optimism was born in a booze-soaked town. It's a jaunty little city that openly cheers and toasts you as you walk down the street minding your own business. Sure, it has its classic neo-Franco-Federal Americana roots, but lift Louisville's skirt above the hem and her freak flag flies in the slightest breeze. This town bothers to put giant musical sculptures in sad, forgotten alleys, and creates art seemingly out of the ordinary at every turn. Even such staunch, unimaginative institutions as banks are jovial and jocose. I mean, Steph Lawless would have a field day here, even the trees were giving me eyes. Bottom line, Louisville isn't so much a city as it's a vibe. The vibe starts downtown with its seductive schizophrenic identity perfectly demonstrated in the 21C Museum Hotel. Sure, pop in for some heavenly harissa hummus with a quick flight of local bourbon that will leave you burping and befittingly buzzed, which is how one should preview the politically charged art gallery/lobby that is sure to trigger even the most agnostic critic. Further satiate your lust for pure Louisville culture and get yourself the unfortunately named Hot Brown at the redundantly named Brown Hotel. Don't let the opulence dripping from the walls or the nearly $30 price tag fool you. The Hot Brown is nothing more than an open-faced turkey sandwich that you're obliged to tell everyone you ate like it was balut in Cambodia. Louisville is nothing if not a real place that seems phony. The dive bars are just called bars, and "put it on my tab" is said out loud here to actual effect. All bars by law must offer karaoke on Tuesdays as a public service. Lastly, the bartenders here are professional murderers, as even the most pedestrian watering holes serve deadly good drinks. I stopped looking for a reason to leave a long time ago. Now I just try to weave myself into the fabric of whatever city is laid out before me. As hard as I try to follow the weft of Louisville, one thread seems unbreakable. Bourbon. This city has over 100 distilleries that produce 95% of the world's bourbon. There are specific rules one must follow to call whiskey bourbon, of which I'm sure any gent in a polo shirt sporting a logo can educate you on. But for me, I wanted a more casual experience with the Brown Beast. With so many possible places to not remember what they told me about how they make the stuff that evokes the memory loss to begin with, I chose a higher ground and simply stumbled my way down the bourbon trail and let fate take the wheel because I was already too drunk to drive my conscience. The Evan Williams bourbon experience screamed to me like a Russian in a tracksuit smoking a Juul. Giving off Amsterdam vibes, I knew this would be the perfect baseline introduction to bourbon culture as I was greeted by a 2-story infinity bottle pouring into a rather giant plastic glass just beyond the entrance. This monolith idol immediately took on a larger metaphor as I discovered that most bourbons are owned by other labels and have huge conglomerates. For instance, Evan Williams is owned by Heaven Hill, who in turn owns Henry McKenna, Bernheim, Rittenhouse, Larceny, Old Fitzgerald, Parker's, Ikesville, and Elijah Craig, to name but a few. If you think that's quite the portfolio, then know that Buffalo Trace, another distillery, is owned by Sazerac, who owns over, wait for it, 450 different labels of alcohol. What's more, I think all of them are owned by a company called Diageo, and Diageo is probably owned by Sony, which in turn is owned by Warren Buffett or something. So cheers, Warren. The whole thing is like when we discovered Chipotle was actually McDonald's. Yeah. No one stopped eating Chipotle. We just smiled a bit less as we did. I'm loving it. Regardless of the harsh reality that we live in a booze oligarchy, the experience Evan Williams offers is pretty fly. Upstairs brings you 100 years back in time where you can walk the perfectly preserved streets of Louisville and even pop into a mid-century booze hall named Max and Harry's to have an original recipe old-fashioned, which is well superior to the new fashion made with Peach Blast Celsius and Albanian children's tears. Overall, a proper way to start my bourbonification as I drink through history. Jumping outside the city, I beeline it to Buffalo Trace because that is what one must do. Buffalo Trace was founded before the country it resides in, if you can believe it, and why wouldn't you? That kind of factoid makes the juice taste better. Even though it's a solid hour from downtown, there is no worthier destination. First, it's just plumb beautiful. Buffalo Trace has a botanical garden, archaeological sites, sits casually next to the river, and is surrounded by pristine nature. Its name derived from the path or trace that buffalo used to take during their migration before we killed them all for sport, much like my liver cells in a minute. The tour here is marvelous as well, as they make bourbon pretty much the same way they have for 250 years, just now on a ridiculously large scale, having to produce 2.5 million gallons of booze each year, a number so large I don't even have a proper joke for it. I can't tell you how thrilling it actually is to have palatable fear from just staring into a tank, because it's 4 stories high and filled to the brim with trillions of hungry yeast you can actually hear eating. You can also buy rare bottles not available to the public at the gift shop, which most people sell on the secondary market for big bucks to help pay for their Turkish hair plugs. Me? I was satisfied drinking Blanton's from the bottle in the parking lot while arguing with people in the comments section about how to pronounce things. Pecan, banal, Arkansas, caramel, whatever. Returning back downtown, I got let off at Louisville's baseball stadium, which is odd considering Louisville doesn't have a baseball team. Fortunately, you can't swing in this town without hitting a distillery, so I walked 20 feet to a place called Angel's Envy, pleased with the intent of dying and going to bourbon heaven. I have learned the key to traveling well is expect nothing, which is why I was blown away by the envy, as I like to call it. I buddied up with a cat named Terry, who was a rollicking, flippant, middle-aged fellow that could get away with suspenders, and had an air that he knew quite well what to do with a porch on a hot southern summer evening. Terry was a riot, both Martin and Lewis in one person, and brought the world of bourbon to life in a way that only someone with a master's mind in being a guide can do. Unique to the envy is that they do finished bourbon, and kudos to the marketing team that came up with that term, as it deems all other bourbons not finished by definition. What it means in actuality is that after following the rules for making true Kentucky bourbon, of which Terry told me again, but at this point I didn't even attempt to retain it, they then place the booze in ruby port casks that they source from a place that they call Europe. That just sounds lovely, and let me tell you, it tastes lovely too. The whole experience of the envy, from the color to the fragrance to the cloud-like head it gives you upon consumption, is nothing less than lovely. It should be. We start with the best, so we can leave behind the rest. Old Terry waxed as he casually pulled out a clear bottle from his back pocket and wantonly splashed a decent amount in his palm like my father would do with aqua velva back in the day. Unlike my father, he then greedily attempted to lap up the liquid like an old bloodhound. Pure white lightning in a bottle. This comes off our two-store copper still, where gravity slowly migrates the liquor over plates to constantly purify into the sweetest heart you've ever had. The term heart means the good part of the liquor that comes off the still. The heads and the tails precede and follow and contain compounds that are effectively cleaning solutions that you don't want to drink, which you'll typically find in a bottle like Jose Cuervo, which I'll now demonstrate the proper way to drink. As you can see, you really only want to drink the hearts, and apparently having a 2-story copper plate lined still is exactly how you do that. I confirmed this fact by also cowboy slapping a fistful of this 160 proof moonshine in my face, which made me feel like those race car drivers who are being burned alive by invisible fire. However, like a man, I scowled and nodded while resisting the intense urge to stop, drop, and roll while simultaneously wetting my pants. The next afternoon, I woke up. I had but a sock on and a takeout menu stuck to my face with remnants of french fries strewn around me, so I knew I was safe. I began to think about all the greats that came before me that used alcohol as their vehicle for inspiration. The Hemingways, the Goes, the Cashes. How on earth would I be able to write the first thing about Louisville if I can't remember a thing? Oh, Thank heaven for cameras, I thought as I put pen to paper and tried to unapologetically write a love letter to my dear Louisville while scrolling through my bourbon-soaked phone. Funny, it was stickier than I expected, which is more than I can say from my memory. And maybe that's the heart of what travel is really all about.